What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Claudia Belfato holding it down in the DraftKings studio in Boston. We got a great show for everybody, as always, today. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. Try and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, and Roku. Catch the best of Gojo and Golic wherever you hear VSiN on the radio from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern. Got a fun one today. Claudia, what are we looking at coming up on the show?
Yeah, Gojo, really excited to hear about your conversation with the man behind the Patriots documentary, The Dynasty, filmmaker Matthew Hamacheck. And Cam Newton has something to say about Kirk Cousins in Atlanta, because of course he does. And the guys run through their NFL free agency superlatives. Curious if Calvin Ridley makes any of those lists. So let's start there, because free agency officially kicked off yesterday at 4 p.m. So all of the reported trades and moves became official. But then, out of left field, came the news that Calvin Ridley's not staying with the Jags, not going to the Patriots, but actually is being sent to the Tennessee Titans. 4 years, $92 million deal. Gojo, where did this one come from?
Completely out of left field. And I would say this, Dad, maybe we should have considered this a little bit more, because I looked up yesterday and reminded myself, oh, that's right, the Tennessee Titans have the most cap space in the NFL right now. They've got money to burn. Brian Callahan is coming over with a quarterback in Will Levis working into his second year, who's going to continue to need help around there. You had DeAndre Hopkins in the building already, but besides that, you had turned over a bunch of your identity when Derrick Henry finally walked out the door. So I can understand this, Dad, even if I look at their wide receiver room and don't necessarily feel like this is a murderer's row of 2024 high-end NFL talent. We talked about the limited marketplace for wide receivers and veteran wide receivers right now. And so unless they were going to try in a way to weasel T. Higgins out of Cincinnati, which we know still has a bunch of hurdles that would have to be cleared, this was the best move on the board to improve this position. And they went out and made it. And quite honestly, I think had to overpay a little bit to do it.
Well, this is what happens about you, because obviously there's all kind of criticism about how much you got paid. And let me tell you where you're not going to hear any criticism. This show. Man, go get your money, okay? They got money to spend. They spent it on you. If they had to, in some people's minds, overpay, okay, so what? I'm not going to be critical of the move. Congratulations, Calvin. You secured the bag, and that is an awesome bag. And listen, what they're doing, I think, is a good move in the fact that you want to get weapons for a young quarterback, right? You want to help out your young quarterback going to Will Levis as much as you can. So you get him, veteran help like this, and that's what they've done with Calvin Ridley. Had the bad last year, obviously, in Atlanta. With back in 21 with only 5 games and then suspended the entire year. So it was really kind of up in the air where his career was going to go. Being a former first-round pick, goes to Jacksonville, does get over 1,000 yards, has over 13 yards a catch, So he had himself a nice year. Did I expect to read this amount? No, I did not. But when I read it, I just stood up and clapped my hands and said, way to go. That is awesome. But in the bigger picture, I do like the fact of getting a veteran wide receiver to help your young quarterback.
Yeah, I think it becomes interesting to think about what the plan is for a team like Tennessee, who is going through a transition right now. Brian Callahan was sort of the surprising name off the board, I think, at the point in the NFL hiring cycle when he did come off the board, was an assistant under Zach Taylor at Cincinnati. The work that they did with Joe Burrow on that offense, where Brian Callahan didn't call the plays, but he's a part of doing everything else, and he'll call the plays here now. Dan, I'm curious what kind of offense they're going to build around Will Levis, because he's not a quarterback that you look at and think, all right, that's Joe Burrow. You can just plug and play him in all the stuff you do there. What they did in Cincinnati was very specifically tailored to, hey, Joe Burrow likes to be in the gun. Joe Burrow likes to see the field. Joe Burrow loves 4 and 5 wide sets so that he can be in control of the situation, and he's so good that he is. I think we saw most of Will Levis's best days in college at Kentucky were with Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator who runs all the McVay stuff. So I think it's good to have those weapons there, Dad. But to me, what this signaled, and the most important thing to come from this, is they're going to be spending early draft capital on the offensive line. The Tennessee Titans pick 7th in the draft right now, and with the haul of guys that we have at the offensive tackle positions in this draft, I'd imagine Brian Callahan, Bill's son, or Bill's father, and one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL, who he pulled out of Cleveland to come over here, is going to have a lot to work with between their first-round pick from last year and Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern, and whichever big beefy lad they take this year.
Yeah, and you mentioned getting Cushenberry, the center over there, for $50 million. I agree. I think they're going to build there. And Mike, I'm not sure. I'm with you. What running game are you going to have? Tony Pollard was kind of given the show in Dallas, right? And it didn't work. It didn't work having him as the main back. You know, it worked better when he was splitting time with Zeke. Now he's the main back there. You know, or how are they going to split that up? That's what I want to see, because that's another thing. I talked about bringing in veteran wide receivers to help a young quarterback. You know what else helps a young quarterback? A running game. If you can get a running game going, that's going to help Levis a whole lot. And I'm not sure where they are at the running back position, a position that we talked about very early in the, legal tampering when there were actually 10 running backs before Derrick Henry even went to Baltimore. The running back position went crazy, not with huge money, bigger money for them than they're normally used to, but not for huge money. And I think that's a reason why you can get them more on the cheap. And we all wondered, we knew Derrick Henry wasn't going to be back in Tennessee. So what route were they going to go? And that's a wait and see to me with Tony Pollard, because it wouldn't be gone from Dallas if the one running back thing worked in Dallas, and he is. So I'm not sure how that's all going to work in Tennessee, of where the running game is going to come from.
Yeah, I know they had Tyjae Spears, the running back out of Tulane, that they really liked last year, who ended up actually eating into some of Derrick Henry's carry load and was able to help him out there and has a bunch of assets. They're, I think, types-wise, you had, like you're going to have now in Baltimore and pretty much anywhere Derrick Henry exists, an interesting collaboration of body types in the backfield when you've got the big back and then you've got Keaton Mitchell there. Here in Tennessee, you're going to have a little bit more similarities there in terms of how these guys are built and the skill sets. But yeah, I think a lot more of that is going to be led up front. And again, this is something I always say that we should probably talk about and advocate for more when we're looking at how teams get built in the NFL, and especially in a draft where you're going to take a bunch of really good offensive linemen, is who your offensive line coach is matters a lot. Do you have one of the people like we've seen over the years, Mike Munchak and certainly Brian Callahan amongst others, my former offensive line coach Harry Heastan, that are guys that can develop young talent, as opposed to, hey, do you have a coach who's good and just needs a guy that comes in a little bit more game ready from one of these blue chip schools? With Tennessee, you've got options. If you want to take Joe Alt, great. If you want to take Olu Fashanu out of Penn State, who's probably got a higher ceiling but's a little less fully developed right now, man, Claudia, you got a pretty decent shot. And I think those kind of options are enticing to any team going into the draft because of what they've got in the coaching staff.
So lots of moving pieces, it sounds like. I was curious to see what their odds were. So I want to ask you guys this question. They're 11-1, fourth place in the AFC South. There was a massive jump. The Colts are right ahead of them at plus 275. Texans the 150 favorite, then the Jags at 200. Should the gap be that big between them and the Colts, or do you think they can do anything in the draft to shorten those odds, or is the gap really that big, Gojo?
I think the gap is probably in the right spot with that, just because, and I know we still have a lot of Anthony Richardson questions with the Colts that are going to get answered this year, but I think so much of what we saw last year from Shane Steichen, their head coach, when you had Anthony Richardson get injured, when you got as much as you did out of Gardner Minshew for stretches of last season, so much so that the Raiders tossed him a fair amount of money. And I think a lot of people that watched that team closely would say, yeah, a lot of that was Shane Steichen, putting him in some pretty good positions, the RPO stuff that he brought over from that Eagles offense during Jalen Hurts' best year. And so while there is some worry about that, the offensive line for the Colts last year got back to looking like the offensive line for the Colts that we had seen from a couple of years ago. You signed Jonathan Taylor going forward. You retain Michael Pittman. And so you put all these things around him in addition to a coach that came in and now already established, hey, I'm good at this. For Brian Callahan, we don't know what that's going to look like that. And so I think some of the unknowns there, a young quarterback in Will Levis that, like Anthony Richardson, we still haven't seen. We've seen some good, some bad, more from Will Levis because he was healthy for the year when he got into the game. But yeah, I think those odds are in the right place. What about you, Dad?
I think it might be a little much. Now, the Colts, I agree, they have better pieces with Pittman coming back, with Taylor in the backfield, but both teams have question marks at the quarterback position, right? We don't know what direction Will Levis is going, and now Anthony Richardson, we liked early what we saw with him, but he got hurt, and that's a fear with a quarterback that's going to run around, especially a big one like that certainly doesn't have any fear about running into anybody. So while they have better pieces, I don't know if I'd have that much distance. We'll see how some of the moves work out. The Titans made some moves on defense as well. And I agree with you, and it's my fault not talking about Spears in the backfield splitting time. He did have 52 catches out of the backfield, so we know we can add that part of it. That's a great safety valve for a young quarterback when you can tag a running back out of the backfield. So while I agree the Colts have better parts, I don't know if I agree there's that much distance between them because of the live question marks at quarterback position for both teams.
It's a very interesting division overall because outside of Houston that now feels like a known commodity and a team that's pushing some of their chips closer to the middle of the table to try and go and win now while they've got a young quarterback on a rookie contract. I know we've had the conversation about, hey, that's probably a little overblown in terms of the advantage that we once thought it was, but it's still an advantage. And I think I saw Dan Orlovsky yesterday compare them to the 2021 Bengals where, hey, we know our quarterback's a dude, and we found out very early on. You didn't have to wait 2 or 3 years for this. You get to now play a different brand of football than almost everybody else, and that's a huge advantage for that team. But everybody else that we mentioned, I mean, after that last year, the Jacksonville Jaguars have a fair amount of questions they got to answer about their high-end potential. So that's an interesting division, and this is an interesting day, I think, to consider the moves made in free agency by coaches in new places. So, Claudia, I want to migrate out west to a much more difficult division in the AFC West and see what the Chargers continued to do in free agency yesterday.
Yeah, continuing to make those moves. Big one here, releasing longtime receiver Mike Williams after parting ways with Austin Eckler, who we talked about out of that backfield now with the Commanders. This move, though, with Williams is going to save the Chargers $20 million against their cap, and he will become a free agent. He has been recovering from a torn ACL suffered in late September, so a little banged up, which it seems like all these guys are at this point. But Senior, now that they are under the cap, they did restructure the deal with Khalil Mack. They made some adjustments on defense. What is sort of the next move for them? They brought in Gus Edwards. Where do they start filling the roles now?
Well, they got to stop the run. I mean, they were so bad at stopping the run. They got to be able to. We talk about up the spine, Mike, you know, the interior D-line, the linebackers into the safety position. I mean, the Chargers really, really struggled against the run. We're in awe every year of their offensive capabilities, but that included Mike Williams, who unfortunately blew his ACL out and got hurt right at the end of the year before that. And you lose, Austin Eckler as well. So now you have a couple of question marks coming in. Obviously, you know what you have in Keenan Allen. So the part of the team that you had really not a lot of questions about, and we had put it more on Brandon Staley. Why can't you get more out of this offense? And certainly, Brandon, you're a defensive guy, and your defense is not living up at all. I think, and I think it was going to be this way because they were so far over the cap and had to make moves. Mike, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's the next step they're going to take, losing talent, even though they had Williams out for the entire season. Pretty much last year, so you didn't have him anyway. I do have some question marks on, are they going to take a step forward? Are they going to stay neutral? Or are they going to take a little bit of a step back before they go forward? But we can keep talking about Herbert and that offensive firepower, but man, they have to fix that defense.
So I think for the Chargers, this formula is going to be easy this year. And like they've been saying it in public, when you hear about Greg Roman, it's not, all the things I can do with this quarterback. It's, look at how we can do things for him. Like he's not had a running game like Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh are very hell-bent on giving him. And you sign Gus Edwards and you got a big back in there. They're sitting at 5, and I would bet most of my money in all of the churches that they're probably going to take an offensive lineman at 5 and throw some beef opposite Rashawn Slater and keep this thing moving because, Dad, they knew coming into this, hey, this is a job that's got a big advantage because you've got Justin Herbert and nobody else does, and that's awesome. But you also have a bunch of aging veteran contracts that had not been as productive or as available to you as they needed to be, and so this stuff was going to happen, and I think while all that's going on, they're going to say, all right, yeah, we might have to lose some receiver talent. I think might be some questions about Joey Bosa, whose salary for this year would become, or I think a roster bonus kicks in on Friday about, hey, if they're going to keep paying him, considering how oft injured he's been as of late and unavailable to them that he's been, like there's going to be questions there about them as they trim salary. They're near the bottom of the barrel in terms of being over the cap in the NFL. But I think in the meantime, they're going to simplify the equation. They're going to get some pluggers on both sides of the ball, and they're going to try and, I think at the right time, catch the NFL in this wave where we've seen a bunch of teams go, hey, we're going to try and beat the hell out of you in the middle because so everyone got so light and fast all of a sudden. Jim Harbaugh's style couldn't be inserting itself back into the league at a better time.
Yeah, while I agree with that, I think this is kind of a stagnant year for them because all the moves that were basically made weren't really for this year. It was moves to handle a roster that wasn't in good shape, whether it's players producing on the field or money they had to get around. So they had to deal with all that minutia before Jim can even start worrying about what kind of team he's putting together. So I've heard some people describe it as Harbaugh's in a gap year, where he has a gap year to kind of figure it out and kind of start to assemble the roster that he wants for what he wants to do. And I think I kind of agree there. It's tougher to get a handle on what they're going to do, but I do think it is good before you see really what Jim Harbaugh is going to do with this team. I think it's going to be at least a year.
I'm trying to figure out what Jim Harbaugh's Eat, Pray, Love year would be like if he were to take one here. I think it would just involve a lot of milk and almost raw chicken, but that sounds like the extent of it there. I don't know how much Jim Harbaugh international traveling. I think we've seen some of that when his daughters posted videos of him on vacation where he's doing like extremely dad stuff in the airport, like showing up 2.5 hours or 3 hours early to try and get there. I feel like you and Jim Harbaugh would have a lot of dad commonalities.
I don't know. I don't show up that early for flights. I'm one of those that likes to get to the airport right in time to just walk onto the plane. I'm a risk taker there. Wow. I'm a risk taker, seeing if I'm going to get through security, if there's going to be a line or not.
It's a unique rush, and I mean that's where we'll sound elitist.
Gojo, how do you not know this about your dad? How do you not know this about your dad just cruising in through the airport? Come on. You guys haven't traveled together enough?
I mean, I haven't had to travel with my dad in a long time outside. Like when we left ESPN, we traveled there some for work. Mm-hmm. But as a kid, I don't know. I think still the other general tenets of a dad on vacation where you're just trying to keep everyone happy. It's about the dad outfits. Yeah. We would often go on vacation with some really good family friends of ours, the Perianos, and the two dads. When they would combine forces, we'd call them the dream team because they'd always be walking in front of the rest of the group there. They're just viciously tipping anyone in their vicinity. If you breathe within 100 yards of my dad and Mike Periano, you're probably getting handed a $100 bill just for existing. You may not have helped. You may have actually done something to negatively affect our stay. And these men on vacation are just so predisposed to give out money to people that they can't physically stop themselves.
Hey, it's the best way when you're out on vacation somewhere to make sure people are going to, and you're right, treat your family the right way. It's not so much us, but you want to make sure for the wives and the kids everything is cool. So yeah, you tip the hell out of everybody. I don't see anybody turning down a tip, and I don't see anybody normally say, you know what? I might help them a little bit more because they gave me a tip. There's thinking behind it. That's guy math right there.
Dad math.
There was a method
Dad math.
was a
there you
method
go.
to
You're
that
right.
madness. Dad, oh God, we need to get the dad. Well, I mean, listen, we're in potentially TikTok's dying days, so I was gonna say maybe we could see if we can get dad math going on TikTok, but they got some other battles that they're fighting right now.
Yeah,
I will say that benefited
do.
us when we took a family trip to Africa, and I was decided to get a workout for some reason at the hotel in there. Ended up sawing off my ankle on the elliptical. I'll send the video to our producers so we can show it at some point here. Absolutely wrecked my ankle alone in the gym, and we had to approach the hotel manager out by the pool not to file a complaint, not to do anything to try and get litigious. We said, hey, we'll sign whatever waiver you need. We need the security camera footage of the weight room from about 20 minutes ago because we got something we need to see. And because my dad had so generously tipped everybody, the guy was like, all right, sure. And we got one of the funniest videos that exists of me absolutely turning into a bug on the floor of a gym in East Africa. God help me.
To Gojo and Golic. Jamar Chase sent us into a tailspin yesterday on Twitter with the speculation that Justin Jefferson would be joining him in Cincinnati. And as Gojo speculated, this was all just a bunch of crap, really, because it's not true. Diana Russini reported that Jefferson is staying put. In the tweet, she said the Vikings came close to extending Justin Jefferson last offseason in Indy. They aggressively rejected the idea of trading the star. Kirk Cousins' departure hasn't changed things. The Vikings have no plans to trade Jefferson, sources tell me. And as she said, Jefferson did want to stay and play with Kirk Cousins under center, but as we know, he is off and away out to Atlanta. So let's toss to a little sound as he is on his way to Atlanta. Kirk Cousins. Oh, we don't have sound on Kirk Cousins, but I will tell you guys, he gave good sound to the Viking fans, saying that he will miss them. Of course, he was there for a while, but he already has that Dirty Bird chain, guys, which I'm not surprised by. Said he'd get a new chain with all his money. Senior, what do we think about this departure and the fact that Justin Jefferson is staying put?
I would have been stunned had Justin Jefferson not stayed put. I mean, you draft somebody, they have clearly fit that draft and lived up and beyond what maybe you even thought to be when you're the best receiver or in the team picture of best receiver. You don't let a player like that go, especially now at the position of wide receiver that is really starting to jump out. And I know you can get young receivers that come in and play well. Hell, he was one of them just a couple of years ago, was one of these young receivers that came in and did a great job. You don't let guys like that go. I know you have to take care of your quarterback position, but if you're going to build a championship team, you know what you need? Great players. Justin Jefferson, great player. The thought that he would, and this isn't anything against Minnesota because I believe in their minds, they've said it, he is going to be here and they're going to work out a deal. I'll be way more shocked if they didn't get it done and he was somewhere else than if he doesn't land just a monster deal. He had to be applauding more than anybody at the Calvin Ridley deal that went on and what Calvin got, because he's going to be the highest paid wide receiver in the league.
Well, I mean, it shouldn't stop there, quite frankly. By the way, I was laughing during what you're saying because, as you said, hey, you draft a player at a premier position who goes out and shows you everything they're supposed to be. You don't let those guys walk out the door. Carolina Panthers fans have to go want to play in traffic right now. Like, this is all just a reminder of the organizational ineptitude that they've been living as Brian Burns is now frolicking around New York City with bags of money and a new lease on life because he's gotten away from that ding-dong, the witch is dead situation. But I never thought Justin Jefferson was going to get traded. I just was wondering how difficult Justin Jefferson was going to be able to make it at the negotiation table. Because, Dad, forget like highest paid wide receiver. Justin Jefferson should be the highest paid non-quarterback in the history of the NFL. You can debate whether or not he's the best non-quarterback in the NFL in the league or what have you, but at the position he sits in right now, what other choice Minnesota have? You got no one else to keep happy and nothing else to satisfy you on offense or to prop you up now that Kirk Cousins is gone. You need him so much more than he needs you. And so, I mean, it's like Goodwill Hunting with Ben Affleck kicking his feet up on the table, shouting retainer at dude. His agent doesn't need to listen to a word that comes out of Minnesota's mouth. The only thing that should be coming out of them is bags of money going from their accounts being wired directly into Justin Jefferson's accounts because he has all of the leverage. As soon as Kirk Cousins walked out the door, Justin Jefferson already, who had a ton of leverage because of how well he's played and how well he played in the face of all this volatility last year, just got even more. So this should be a ridiculous. Aaron Donald's currently the highest paid non-quarterback in terms of average salary per year in NFL history. He makes $31.7 million per year on his new deal. Tyreek Hill makes $30 million right now a year. He's the only receiver in the NFL that does. This should easily be north of $32 million a year. Easily.
Completely agree. This is an easy one because we mentioned the receiver, Tyreek Hill, is just a tick below Aaron Donald as far as, average annual salary. So you're right. This is make it 32 mil, make it 35 mil, whatever. He's going to set the new standard for the wide receiver position, which is going to get interesting because of so many great young wide receivers we have in the league and also that are getting ready to come into the league right now. That is a position, that wide receiver position, and probably that D line, maybe even, the edge rushers always make that big money, but D tackles starting to make the big money. You look at positions that are making that jump, that are becoming way more dominant in the NFL than it's the normal quarterback, left tackle, edge rusher, cornerback. Those had been the money positions. Now we're seeing other positions increase their value greatly, except for the running back position.
Well, we're seeing wide receivers do it on the high end, and I do wonder if the wide receiver market's going to look like a lot like the star market in Major League Baseball, where, hey, if you're really good and it's undeniable, we'll give you tons of money, and it'll be a great time. If you're one of the guys in the middle of the pack, we can go get another one just as good who's like 21 years old and on a rookie contract. That feels like the direction that we're going because of what's happened with the amount of good guys at that position that have been coming into the league. So going to be very interesting. The gap left behind in Minnesota is sizable right now. And with the answer seemingly in the draft in terms of what's actually going to be the person under center for Minnesota, there's a ton of questions there and a ton of turnover. We know defensively, Daniil Hunter out, Jonathan Greenard in. All these changes, they're going to be around that organization, but at least coaching-wise, it feels pretty stable. And then on the other side, we do have Kirk Lana beginning right now. I've seen all the memes about how funny it's going to be watching Kirk Cousins walk into a Waffle House and try and act like he's at home in that scenario. But in the meantime, Claudia, a familiar voice has emerged in the conversation around Kirk Cousins. I don't know about you guys. I have become so thankful for Cam Newton's place in the sports media sphere.
I have to agree with you. It's like we know that he's going to have to say something, especially about quarterback news like this, and he did. I'm going to let him say it. Take a listen.
We're not talking about skill set. We're talking about what the statistics say. And even though that it is extremely alarming that he only had one playoff win.
Because I was going to ask you, what are you playing the game for?
In 12 years. He's been breaking the bank. But it's like a safe pick. I feel like, I don't know, I think that the Atlanta Falcons was trying to go find a Matt Ryan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
they was trying to scratch that itch.
Yeah. I think he's good enough to put them in position to win.
Okay.
So it ain't just like it's a trash pick or a trash acquisition. You know what I'm saying? It's just one of them situations. Now, he's coming off of a Achilles. I can't make it about me. But if I were to make it about me, it's like, yo, I had Lance Frank injury. Not as bad as an Achilles injury. Yeah. But damn, who is your agent? Like, damn, who the hell is structuring all these?
So I'm not saying, but I'm just saying is what Cam Newton is saying about this situation. Senior, are you surprised? Do you like this Cam Newton in the media thing? And do we see him getting back into the NFL?
No, I do not see him getting back in the NFL, but I love Cam Newton in the media. Number one, I love to see what he's going to wear. Dude can pull off wearing anything. He's that good looking, and I appreciate, good-looking people, and he is one of them. He is large. He was a hell of a quarterback when he was playing. He's a good-looking dude, and I love him in the media saying stuff, whether I agree with it or not. And as we all know, there's so much talk in the media that some you agree with, some you don't. But I love it in there. And you know what? He's a guy that wouldn't mind another chance in the league if he could get it. Like I said, I don't think he's going to get it. But all I can continue to do is sit there and applaud Kirk Cousins for his business acumen or his agent in the amount of money he's able to get, because it is staggering when you look at it. It is staggering when you look at it. When I mentioned it yesterday, I think Aaron Rodgers is the only one who has made more money over his career. Now, he's played a long time as well. I think he's at $331 million now that he has made for 4 playoff games and 1 win. I mean, yet he just keeps getting paid because the team thinks he gets him close. He gets him close. But it was the annual thing in Minnesota. Get you close, and then you pick in the middle of the draft. Get you close, and you pick in the middle of the draft. Oh, my God, this year looks even better, and then you lose in the playoffs. And he doesn't get you over the hump, yet, man, he gets paid. So nothing to do but applaud him. But, yeah, I'm sure Cam's looking at that saying, give me a little taste of that, and I'll come back and play for you.
Cam Newton leaning on QB wins as a stat. I, for one, am stunned by this development and cannot believe that this is the place that he would go. Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. We will get to the inevitability that is the Denver Nuggets in the NBA and one weird Western Conference subplot that we can't wrap our minds around. But in the meantime, Dad, did want to follow up on this because we spent a lot of time yesterday talking about the changing world of college football. We had Nick Saban and the crew all go to Capitol Hill to do the NIL roundtable where they're talking about the future of the sport and trying to get their arms around all the change that's happened recently. And a lot of the focus centered on the players and Nick Saban recounting stories about how him and his wife, Miss Terry, when they'd host recruits, normally his wife would sit there and talk to the mothers about what they're going to do to develop their son and how they're going to take care of them when they get to campus. And he said she remarked right before he retired how now all they want to talk about is what they're going to get paid, how much the system around the sport has changed entirely with these players and what needs to be done, because everyone loves to look at the sport and go, well, the sky is falling. This is all changing. It's going to be very bad around here soon. And I just kind of had to laugh yesterday because, as we've pointed out on here, this is learned behavior. They have looked around and watched the rest of the sport operate with financial gain as largely the only means of dictating success or failure. And yesterday we had a doozy. Texas A&M took their money cannon and fired it directly at Nebraska. They hired now former Nebraska athletic director Trev Alberts, a former All-American linebacker at Nebraska, the athletic director of his alma mater. They bought him out of a deal that he had just signed, an extension last November, to make him the AD at Nebraska through 2031. And now Texas A&M has signed him to a 5-year deal that's going to put him near the top of the SEC and among the top 10 athletic directors nationally in terms of salary, according to sources telling Pete Thamel. So, Dad, Texas A&M, who we said yesterday, we saw Nick Saban, one of the things he said on Capitol Hill was, we need to figure out a system. Nick's been a big proponent of the revenue share, but saying he kind of wants something akin to a salary cap, so one team can't just out-fundraise everybody else. Texas A&M just heard, out-fundraise everybody else. Why didn't you say so? As they keep throwing money at the problem this offseason.
I love the statement from Trev. And Trev was a 5th overall pick in 94 to the Colts, as you mentioned, All-American with Nebraska. So he's the AD of his alma mater. He said, from my perspective, there has never been a more consequential time in history for higher education and the evolving landscape of intercollegiate athletics. Leadership matters now more than ever. My interest in Texas A&M, not only due to its prestigious reputation, but also because President Walsh's compelling vision in which I believe athletics can play a small but important role in helping Texas A&M achieve unprecedented success. Break that 6-line sentence, 6-line paragraph down. They got the money and they're going to spend it. And you want to know why? This is Trev Alberts. I'll give him credit for this. Is looking at the landscape. What do we say? Adapt or die. Adapt or move on in the case of Nick Saban. You know, and other coaches who don't want to deal with it, they move on. They're done with it. Trev Alberts, remember, it wasn't long ago we heard their new coach, Matt Rule, say, hey, you know what? If these quarterbacks want a mill too, we ain't got that. You know, he was playing the we don't have that kind of money to spend card. So Trev, you know, and listen, Trev's right in the middle of that, of knowing what they have to spend, and he knows that Texas A&M, man, they are jumping in piles of money to play the game that you play now. So he made the move because Texas A&M has the ability to play the game this way now. Yet we want to still get on the student athletes for this. When you said it yesterday, and you're right. You know what? They're taking their cue from the adults in the room who are doing the same damn thing. So how many times I read yesterday on Twitter, oh, these players are now ruining college football. No, they are not. The adults are ruining college football. And this is a move that shows, while some people are going, how do you leave your alma mater? Well, for the longevity of your career, you better jump into a situation where you know, at least even if you don't win, you have the it's one thing to not win when you have the ammunition. Then you're going to get fired on your own. But it's another thing to not even be in the game, right? If you're not even going to play the game and get involved in NIL or the collectives or the spending of the money where you don't even have a chance. At least he's going somewhere where he has an arsenal. Now, what he does with it, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, if Texas A&M can't win a national championship in this current era where we do have less I think the thing that gets obscured in the conversation around current name, image, and likeness stuff is when all the talk about change gets brought up. Like, I'm not against having a better, more organized version of what we have now.
Yes.
I do think
Agreed.
we'll get there a little more naturally than a lot of people give credit to, because so much of the wailing and gnashing of teeth is it's not going to stop here. That's my point. We're still figuring this out. It's very new. We're getting a lot of information about this and doing a ton of learning. And so I think all of this is going to change meaningfully before it's all said and done. And players will have more information as they make their decisions. While I don't think that Nick Saban saying all players care about everywhere is the money is necessarily true across the board. College football is too big, wide, and vast for one broad brushstroke to paint everybody pretty accurately. But even if it is the dominant means of decision-making for them right now, it's because it's so new. And eventually it might level out where enough things happen. Some guys make mistakes with that where they'll look and say, hey, maybe I do need to factor in who's coaching me a little bit more than I already was than the immediate dollars and cents of this. I think all that stuff can be true. But the one thing I've never begrudged anyone as we've talked about these conversations when it's come to the coaches who constantly get compared, or now the executives like Trev Alberts, is, hey, I get it. The guy took an offer that was going to pay him more money and let him go play at a spot where they have unlimited resource. They just bought out Jimbo Fisher for $75 million this offseason. Yep. Paying $4 million to get Trev Alberts out of a contract, that's nothing for these people.
And really quick, I can't remember if you mentioned it. That's my attention span already. In putting this in relation to players who are one place and then go to another school for maybe money or a different situation, Trev Alberts just signed an extension last year. Alberts just signed one last year. So here's again, players looking at the adults. This guy signed an extension at Nebraska last year and is gone. Was bought out and is gone. We're not ripping on Trev Alberts. We're just saying the system allows them to do that, yet everybody wants to point their finger at the players when all of a sudden they get the ability to do that, but they shouldn't, and they're ruining the game.
Well, yeah, and like everyone says, it's the wild, wild west. We need structure. It's true free agency. Like, again, and this is what I want to point out. I understand at times it is not a perfect comparison between players and the other people, coaches, administrators, in terms of making some of these. But I would say that's because I would put more weight on this. Someone like Trev Alberts leaving at this point affects more people than any one player leaving a program when they transfer schools. A coach leaving at this juncture, and I don't say this again, I am all for coaches going out and getting the best opportunity for them and their family. It's a hard life. It's a hard job. They're hired and fired very quickly, very often, and have to uproot their families in the process. I've seen a lot of that. But Tony Alford, my old coach from Notre Dame, one of our running backs coach when I was there, who had been at Ohio State for a recent number of years, just left now at this point in the offseason, go take the job at Ohio State. We saw Georgia State have to cancel spring practice because their head coach had, late in the cycle, gone and taken a job, I believe, to be the tight ends coach at South Carolina. That affects so many more players than any one player or a few handfuls of players deciding to transfer out of a program. And so that's the only thing I bring up, and it's what everyone points out with the hypocrisy of it all, but I always want to say, like, I don't have malice towards these coaches, and I understand for them. It's scary right now. It's new. The way you've been doing business, many of them for years and decades, has now been changed completely, and the model feels very different, and change is hard for everybody. But we need to, I think, stop with so much of this like harsh, very binary language about how the sky is falling around this, now it's changed, and we need to do something, and all the hand-wringing. It's like, let's just take a beat. Let's try and talk practically about things that we can do to help in the immediacy. And then let's go about business the way a lot of coaches still are. Like, we've talked to a bunch of them that have looked at this current system and said, yeah, we got to figure out the best way to navigate this, and we will.
And you're right. I'm glad you said it. And because of the way, I know I can sound coming off. I don't begrudge these coaches the ability or ADs to move either. It just gets frustrating when the players now have the right to do it. All of a sudden, they're the bad guys in this whole thing. Because I agree with you. It will get figured out, hopefully sooner rather than later, and it's going to have to be figured out by the adults who, as I said yesterday, have put the players in this situation. So it's time to figure out a solution at some point.
Yeah, it is. So this is just another edition of As the World Turns College Football Edition. Nebraska, I am so sorry. Wake up, everybody. NBA Thanos is back in the driver's seat right now. We will get to the inevitable force of nature, loading up out west, acquiring all the Infinity Stones, and getting ready to potentially make this postseason very, very unfun for the rest of the league. But before we do that, we have a very interesting development now here at Gojo and Golic. I mentioned before there was a video that existed of me at a gym on vacation, absolutely annihilating my ankle in the most unathletic way possible, falling off an elliptical. And we have secured that video now and have it to show to you guys. Claudia's never seen this. Dad was here when we acquired the footage because, again, my dad is such a generous tipper that the hotel people and the manager were unafraid to give us the video for fear that we would get litigious because we agreed to sign basically everything. Here it is.
For the podcast audience there, he's just on an elliptical, and I think you were trying to step off of it, and your foot stuck in the where
there's like a base around the back of the elliptical that keeps it balanced on the ground, and my foot just caught the little edge of it and rolled over the side, Claudia.
So what's with the sitting like a frog for like 2 minutes after? What was that doing for you?
Glad you asked. That was me giving myself a functional movement screening there. So first off, what you see in the video is as I hit the deck, I immediately look over my head where the door is to see if anyone had seen it while they were walking by. Once I established that there were no witnesses, then I went to figuring out, all right, what status is my ankle in right now? Gave it a couple of rolls there on the right, tried to see how it was moving, had the inflammation set in yet. And then once I got through that, then I decided to get up and test its durability on the floor.
Almost like a tipped cow comes to mind. Sorry, Senior, go ahead.
Oh, yes. Yeah, this was gold, Claudia. And while he was looking at the door to see if anybody was there, at the end of the day, because, I got that video, while nobody saw it in person there, millions ended up seeing it around the country because we played it over and over and over again. And I get it. I see what he's doing because whenever you've been hurt, you kind of lay there and you're like, okay, I hurt this. How bad does it hurt? Let me, as Mike said, moving the functional movement of his ankle there. But it was interesting. I mean, the hotel was apologizing, and I'm like, listen, it's his fault. His big dumbass tripped over it and fell. I'm not blaming you guys. I do a show. I want the video to embarrass him nationally. This says you guys won't even be mentioned. There's no litigation here at all. It is all on him falling off that piece of equipment. And they were like, oh, okay, here you go. I was like, all right.
And you're like, here's $20. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And here's your tip now for simply existing and not letting us sue you. Yeah, it's man versus stationary exercise equipment. It's a good reminder to never exercise on vacation. It's a trap and a mistake, and nobody should do it. Go out there, live your life, imbibe to excess, and never, ever get on exercise equipment out there. That was listen, I was never a dynamic athlete, and that showed up in the frame there. So now that we've gotten that out of the way and established, Claudia, let's talk about the NBA and some people infinitely more coordinated than me, because it seems like now we have finally arrived at that point. The Denver Nuggets back in first place in the Western Conference. Who could have thunk it?
And we will get to that, but I just want to say, if anybody's listening or watching and you saw that video, please find a comparison and send it to us on Twitter, because I can't get that vision of Gojo just sitting like this, all fours up. So if you have a picture in mind, please send it to us at Gojo and Golic. Back to basketball, though. You talked about the Joker and the Nuggets. Honestly, I don't know who's going to stop them at this point. We had an NBA Finals rematch last night in Miami. The Nuggets won again, but the scariest part is the Joker only had 12 points. Yes, he had 14 rebounds, but only 12 points. They still got the dub, now at the top spot in the West. The question really is now, we know they're a tough spot for the Celtics to take down. Who else is going to take down this Nuggets squad, Gojo?
I don't know if I'd be comfortable picking anyone else in the meaningful basketball that's about to be played this upcoming spring going into the summer against them, because it just looks so comfortable. Like, Dad, you've been saying all along you expected Denver to wind up in this position as they were sitting there jockeying for position with Oklahoma City and the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have, listen, on Minnesota's side, suffered a major injury in Karl Anthony Towns that affects the offensive output. And Oklahoma City's just young. They're new to this. They're a really fun, exciting team. We love Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and think there's a ton of potential there. But that potential in the face of what's been overwhelming consistency that now got championship experience last year is going to be hard to top.
I don't know who's going to do it because you mentioned the teams. Oklahoma City is young and a bit new to this. Minnesota is playing some ball, but as we mentioned, you got Cat out with the knee. And when he comes back, how's he going to be when he comes back and shape-wise, injury-wise? And then you have the golden guys, out with the Clippers. The 30-somethings who would play well at times and then other times not so much. So I don't see anybody beating Denver in a series. Denver, one of their toughest matchups could be in the opening round if they're taking on the Lakers or the Warriors. Though, quite honestly, they've smoked the Lakers as of late, so that wouldn't be. It would probably be more the Warriors giving them a shot.
Well, I will say, if we like the Nuggets this much, you can get them at plus money at DK right now. They're plus 170 to win the West. Clippers at plus 290. This is a pretty big difference from the Eastern Conference where the Celtics, you got to lay some. They're favorites at minus 110. Bucks pretty far away at plus 290. So do you think the Clippers can edge up on them? I know you guys were just mentioning them, because if not, you're getting good value with the Nuggets right now.
I got a little bit scared the other night. I get it. It ended up being not as serious as the broadcast wanted to paint it when you had that Clippers game,
right,
where Kawhi Leonard went back into the tunnels there and was dealing with back spasms that they said actually he was dealing with these before the game and trying to play through it. It just didn't work out. But it was like a good reminder of the thing that we've been afraid of this entire time with them. And we know it's been there. We know it's been better than usual in terms of Kawhi Leonard being out there and available for you playing games. You've gotten the best out of James Harden. But again, Dad, over the course of a long, grueling playoffs, we're now all this, and we've seen down the stretch of the season, by the way, in terms of the physicality of basketball. I know it's been written about, but the scores plummeting because there's this belief that officials are letting guys play a lot more because the NBA heard everyone talking about how no one wanted these 130 plus point games going on during the regular season. Whether they're going to admit it or not, there's been a clear adjustment right now because the scoring is bottomed out almost across the league. And so I think when you get that, the more physical, concerted defensive efforts that come with the postseason, I do worry now after seeing that again about the Clippers core even more than I did before.
I do as well, but boy, you got to give him credit for now, right? I mean, Kawhi Leonard, 58 games, Paul George, 58 games, Harden, 59 games, Westbrook, 58 games. So they've played. They have, and because you do wait for guys that are in their 30s and play as well and hard as they do, you wonder about the Knicks and missing time and then series in the playoffs. So that's the one thing that holds me back from them because we thought, oh God, Harden just blew up one team, a couple of teams, he's going to go to the Clippers and blow up that team. And it's worked. Listen, it's worked for them there right now. So could they be the biggest threat to Denver? I don't know. We have to see how Karl Anthony Towns comes back, what this young group in Oklahoma City can do, surprising us. Sacramento, they were the people we talked about last year, right? And Sabonis is still doing his thing. Got his 23rd triple-double. I mean, he's 10-0 now against Anthony Davis. Sacramento's sitting in the 6th slot right now, but they were the flavor of the year last year, and now it's Oklahoma City. What can they do? But then there's just, as I thought, Denver just slowly making up back to the top and just going to keep on beating everybody down.
It is interesting. I'd be curious, and I just haven't watched a ton of Sacramento Kings basketball this year, but what's happened between last year where they were the darling? They were what Oklahoma City is this year, this team that we were in love with. And I get they're further down in the standings right now, but we were lighting the beam. We were having a great time. De'Aaron Fox has improved in most statistical categories. He's shooting better from three than he ever has this year. Overall field goal percentage a little bit down off last year. But, I mean, looking at that, he's averaging more points per game than he did the prior year. So there's a lot of these things to like, but apparently we can only handle so much from any small market at any one given time. And Oklahoma City has taken center stage on that and stolen their light, stolen their beam, which is sad to see. We should be able to share light with multiple people at once. That being said, I'll wait for a basketball person to tell me if the Sacramento Kings are actually worth meaningfully investing in at this time. But, I don't know. We're going to get into a very interesting place and can have the conversation as we go along about the Denver Nuggets and what this starts to look like if we inch towards the D word with them, if Boston falls short this season, and all of the potential ramifications, not only just for the Celtics, but for league-wide if all of a sudden Nikola Jokic is the man standing at the mountaintop for too long.
of Gojo and Golic. It's been a crazy last few days with free agency. So instead of doing the typical grades, we're going to do superlatives because that's a lot more fun, guys. So Gojo, I'm going to go to you first with the most likely to be a perfect fit. So basically the best match. Who comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think this one from a football standpoint, Dad, from a spiritual standpoint, from how he's going to look in the uniform, all points us to Las Vegas Raiders defensive tackle Christian Wilkins, who is going to pair up with Max Crosby, two of the most high-usage defensive linemen in the NFL. I believe Nate Tice said 2 of the 7 defensive linemen to play over 850 snaps last season in the NFL now reside on the same team. And while you can debate if they should be playing that much and if it's great for career longevity, the bottom line is in the division that houses Patrick Mahomes on the offseason where Antonio Pierce went on his D-Lineman's podcast and said, we got to touch him up Jordan Rule style. He recruited another goon to go out there and help him do it. So stock up for them, and I think a perfect fit walking into Las Vegas given what Christian Wilkins can do.
I think sometimes it's re-signing your own, so I'd look at like a Chris Jones staying in Kansas City. But to go to a player that moved, I'm going to go Saquon Barkley going to Philadelphia. I mean, this is a team that just absolutely tanked at the end of the year, played horribly. Defensively, we know what went on, but the offense just wasn't clicking like they normally do. Saquon gives them both that attack that helps with Jalen as well, but how he catches the ball out of the backfield as well. So he is twofold to them. DeAndre Swift, who is gone from the running back position, led them with 39 receptions. I think Saquon, as long as he stays healthy, is going to have way, way more than that as far as receptions and then what he does running the ball. So for a team that really, really fell apart last year, I think this is a really good move. At a position we're talking about, the running back position, that's so undervalued in this league, I think he can help Philly big time.
This next one's fun. The Wait How Much award. So basically the money spent that really surprised you. Senior, let's go to you first.
Well, I mean, I think you have to look at Calvin Ridley right out of the gate, right? I mean, to get what he got, again, Tennessee had the money, they had the need, and sometimes you got to overspend. All you need is 2 teams, right? All you need is 2 teams involved, and the price tag can go up. That's in anything. That ain't in sports. That's in life, man. If you're negotiating and you have 2 people involved in it, the price tag is going to go up. It's like being at an auction, as 2 people are battling over something. So he won. And kudos to him for winning it. Anybody else to that, Mike? I'm not sure that
well, I want to stick with that one in Jacksonville first, Dad, just because looking at Jacksonville's side of that, I don't think we talked about that nearly as much when they let Calvin Ridley walk out of the door. Because remember, the reports that we have been dealing with leading up to this was, New England wanted to jump in on this. And then it was, Calvin Ridley wants to stay in Jacksonville and he'd rather be down here with Trevor Lawrence. And now where they are in a world post-Calvin Ridley becomes really interesting and a really important year for Trevor Lawrence in this franchise where, you've still got Zay Jones and Christian Kirk who are part of that group that were injured last year that made it difficult for Calvin Ridley to shine in the ways that we expected. You bring over Gabe Davis, Devin Duvernay from Baltimore, not exactly inspiring a ton of confidence in that group there. We know offensive line-wise, the only changes they brought in was Mitch Morse from Buffalo, who was released by the Bills. Right. And so I do have some concerns about what Jacksonville's done and what feels like a very important offseason for them in adding the talent around Trevor Lawrence to go make a run at this. They didn't walk into the offseason with crazy cap space. And again, I understand Calvin Ridley's production wasn't quite the jump that you were hoping for last year, but understanding that he had also just spent the entire season before on the shelf because of the gambling suspension, I don't know. This feels like a bigger loss for Jacksonville than it is a gain for Tennessee, if that makes sense.
Do we also think that because anytime we look at a Carolina move, we question it because they've done some bad things and some dumb things? And remember, when I say anything about money, I am happy the player gets the money. Were you surprised the guard, Robert Hunt, got $50 million? That one kind of raised my eyebrow a little bit there.
Yeah, was it $50 million guaranteed over the 5 years, $100 million deal?
I believe it was 50 guaranteed, yeah.
But either way, 5-year, $100 million deal. Yeah, I mean, I was a little surprised for that number, but again, it's an offseason where there was a massive jump in the salary cap that people hadn't predicted. And if you're the Carolina Panthers, you were going to have to overpay people because you're not the model of organizational health right now. And so you need people at his position desperately when you've got the small quarterback. That's just the reality of the situation. And so, yeah, you were probably going to have to overpay a little bit relative to maybe what the national opinion was on Robert Hunt, who had been a good player for Miami, one of the few consistents on an offensive line that was constantly dealing with injury. So a lot of money went out for him. I'll say this one, it was less overall because it's not going to be as big of a price tag compared to a lot of the rest of these ones we brought up. But relative to what his role has been so far, I'm fascinated to see what becomes of the Bryce Huff contract for the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that's desperately in need of some pass rush juice that we talked about might be moving on from Sweat or Hassan Reddick this offseason based on the numbers there. And Bryce Huff signs a 3-year, $51 million deal. And the wholesale with him, this is kind of like years ago. I don't know if you remember when the free Aaron Jones movement was going on in Green Bay, because Aaron Jones at that time was an underutilized running back who was hyper efficient in the carries that he was getting. And he had all of the deep analytical numbers that suggested, hey, if you give this guy more, he's going to be doing well. For Bryce Huff, these last couple of seasons, we've seen him, especially in the efficiency stats. For the second year in a row this past season, Bryce Huff led the league in quarterback pressure rate according to Next Gen Stats. He generated pressure on 21.8% of his rushes this last season. So when you look at that stuff and the get-off time and what he's done in limited reps on a Jets defense that had plenty of depth along the edges, I think this is a bet on him, saying, hey, if we put more on your plate, you've shown the traits for a guy who is a get-off god. I mean, off the line of scrimmage, he's like a track athlete, saying, hey, yeah, you can handle the load and give us that guy, give us a little bit of juice, especially if we lose Hassan Reddick, who was kind of the tip of the spear on that defensive line. So less that I think he was overpaid, and Claudia, more than I just think, hey, this is a gamble on future projection, which is always the toughest thing to do in this league.
So neither of you guys are with Cam Newton and being shocked by the Kirk Cousins price tag of $180 million, or was that right just because he was the best available?
He's been doing that his entire career. I mean, he has been doing the business of football better than anybody his entire career, so does not shock me. That position never shocks me because of the money going out.
All right, next one.
And again, it probably should. Like, we should all probably be a little bit more leery about saying that Kirk Cousins is going to fix the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I have seen plenty of Falcons fans point out, as people say, oh, get ready to be disappointed. They're like, my brother in Christ, do you know who we are? We are disappointment. If disappointment was a franchise, I mean, hell, even a city traditionally sports-wise, it would probably be Atlanta. So if you think Kirk Cousins can hurt them worse than they've been hurt in the past, you clearly have not been reading the lore.
They've been there.
Real quick, Claudia, real quick, just to be factual on Robert Hunt, it was $1 million deal. I said 50 guaranteed. It's 63 guaranteed. So $100 million contract, 63 guaranteed. So again, kudos to you, my man, for grabbing that money.
He's getting paid. Either way, $13 million more than we thought. This next one, I'll trade you for that. So basically, the best one that you think other teams would maybe be a little bit jealous of.
So I'll say, Dad, this one just because I think, again, we've mentioned some of the obvious ones in here, like the Christian Wilkins one is, the Christian Wilkins signing was great. That was a free agent signing, so I shouldn't say. Brian Burns is the one I was thinking of. That's the obvious answer to this question because they so thoroughly fleeced the Carolina Panthers, who botched that famously and now get a really dynamic pass rusher because of that. But if I'm going to go a little bit outside of that, I would say Carlton Davis to the Detroit Lions, a defined need for a team that's a championship contender right now, who get a really productive player coming over from Tampa Bay at that spot in a year where, yeah, listen, they hit last year on some of their young draft picks in the secondary. They're going to have C.J. Gardner-Johnson heading back to Philadelphia this offseason. So I think getting a guy at this spot of need, there are people wondering if they'd be in on L'Jarius Sneed potentially and that's potential tag and trade with Kansas City. But I think in the meantime, this is a really good deal for a team that knows, all right, we've got a couple of areas we've really got to address, and seeing them go out and tick that off with a good name in the beginning of free agency, I think was a win.
Yeah, I wonder about what did you think about Pittsburgh trading Deontay Johnson to Carolina? Carolina looking for other receivers. Thielen was the main guy last year. Johnson only had 51 catches, did have over 14 yards a catch, same amount of touchdowns as George Pickens out there. So to try and keep weapons for now, who I think Russell Wilson is going to be the starting quarterback there. I was, I guess, a little bit surprised that they had the 1-2 punch of Pickens and Johnson, went out to get a new quarterback in Russell Wilson, even though they still believe in Kenny Pickett. That one, not a huge shocker to me, but a little surprising to me.
So I would say this, like, we remember there was a lot of smoke coming out of think about the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is an organization that for a long time was able to keep Antonio Brown from going wild. Like, think about that. Antonio Brown, who now is on Twitter tweeting any number of unhinged things at any number of times, for a while looked like someone we would not have known all of this was under the hood in Pittsburgh. And we always said that's a testament to Mike Tomlin. This last season, a lot of that stuff made it out of the house, and Deontay Johnson, whether it was the lackadaisical effort or the stuff with the fumble, like all of that leaked out of the house. And we had that discussion with Cam Hayward about how do you handle something like that? Because we're not used to seeing that around Pittsburgh. I would say made it a little bit more understandable. Plus, that organization's track record of being able to draft outside of the first round and bring in quality receivers combined with what's coming up in the draft gives you a fair amount of confidence that they're going to be able to make this happen. So I kind of understand why this was maybe coming for Pittsburgh, but also for Carolina, this is a win. I saw Mina Kimes tweet about this, that Deontay Johnson, ESPN has a wide receiver open score, and over the last 3 seasons, Deontay Johnson ranks first among all wide receivers in that score in terms of how often he can get open for a quarterback, which was a difficult thing for Carolina receivers to do over the course of last season. So seeing that note from Mina being reminded about his game, I do think that's a potential win for Carolina.
Yeah, he was also a $10 million cap hit too, so I don't know if that, how much that may have had to do with it. And God knows they've had their issues on the field with some of those players. I get it, where even Mike Tomlin's leadership was questioned a little bit. Is he letting that go? So I'll be interested to see. I'm sure a lot of people will where that team comes back to as Tomlin tries to continue his above 500 record for about the 20th year, 18th, 19th year, something like that.
It is an impressive record, for sure. All right, let's transition from guys who found new homes to ones that are maybe staying home. Bucs GM Jason Licht gave us one reason that he re-signed Baker Mayfield. He referred to a certain scale, but I'll let him say it.
He set the tone for this team with his, for lack of a better word, he's probably a 1 out of 10. He's a 10 on the prick scale. So sorry, Nelson.
Thank you. I'll take that.
So it's like that's what you want in your offensive lineman, and Baker's kind of an offensive lineman in a quarterback's body. So it's what's rallied this team this year. He's a big part of it.
The prick scale, which leads us to the Welcome Back Award. Senior, I know you mentioned Chris Jones off the top with the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Is that the first name that comes to mind for you?
Oh, without a doubt, it's the first name. But and when I go to Tampa, I'd even do the package of Baker and Mike Evans, because I think getting both those guys back for the team that won the division. We know Atlanta got better with Kirk Cousins at quarterback and some of the weapons that they have. But I think the package deal of Evans and Baker going back to Tampa Bay, say, let's run this thing back again. And let's try and win the division again. And we've talked about it. I love Baker Mayfield's attitude. I know players love playing for him. It's always a little bit of a question mark of how well he's going to do, but he went to the tune of career high in touchdown passes last year. So outside of Chris Jones, which I think was the absolute no-brainer, I think getting not one but both those guys, Baker and Evans, back in Tampa was a big thing.
I think I heard Bill Barnwell say it in the Dominique Foxworth show the other day. We need to all make sure that we continue to say we don't believe in Baker Mayfield publicly, because the minute you start to expect things from him, that's when the trouble has traditionally shown up in his career. So we've got to keep fueling the chip on his shoulder, because can I just say what Jason Licht said about him? In the football and the sports world in general, we know the cardinal sin on the other side is when you call somebody soft. It's like the greatest slight you can levy at a high-end athlete. I feel like calling them a prick, and I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that on here, but I did, and so did he, so here we go.
I did too.
That's like the nicest thing that you can say to these guys. Like him saying that Baker Mayfield is like an offensive lineman is the highest compliment that you can pay to a skill player there. I remember, and that's what I always used to tell people, Tommy Reese, who's now the tight ends coach for the Cleveland Browns, when he was getting into coaching coaching and going to be an offensive coordinator. I'm like, that guy lived with Zach Martin and Chris Watt in college. He lived with offensive linemen, tight ends, and linebackers. He said if he wanted to come back as another position, if you could be reincarnate as another position, he would want to be a pulling guard. So I always said Tommy Rees was an offensive lineman masquerading in a quarterback's body, and I do firmly believe that's like the nicest compliment you could pay somebody. So Baker Mayfield should be honored that he was compared to the foremost position group in all of football. He should wear that crown. But yes, Dad, to your original point, it's Chris Jones. It's overwhelmingly Chris Jones. It's so impossibly Chris Jones in this that it couldn't be. This should be the Chris Jones Award for being the most important Chris Jones to your team, because he continues to give them a chance to have that three-pronged approach between Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. And you can throw Andy Reid. This can be a four-ring circus that's going to get them back to winning another Super Bowl and be the first team to win 3 in a row.
I also apologize. I did not realize that's a bad word. I was like, I'll let him say it. And then he said it, so I said it. So that's my bad.
He said it. We said it.
I just didn't think it was that bad. Anyways, we move on.
I would never say that on air. I can't believe you.
Sorry,
youngins.
Mom. Sorry, show dad. Okay, the most likely to prove that running backs still matter in the NFL. Senior, again, I am sorry, but give me a running back that you think was the best signing.
Well, I talked about Saquon earlier and how he's going to help Philly, but what Derrick Henry can do for the 30-year-old running back this year, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the cliff, the 30-year-old when you fall off. This guy ran, at 280 attempts last year. 2022, 349 attempts for over 1,500 yards. Catches the ball out of the backfield some as well. But what he can help bring to Baltimore, who has Lamar Jackson. Remember, Lamar Jackson's years there, they only had one running back over 1,000 yards, and that was Mark Ingram in 2019. I think Derrick Henry can surpass that. And if he could be that 30-year-old that gets over 1,000 yards, that helps Baltimore again have the number one rushing team in the league. We know a lot of that is Lamar Jackson as well. But I think, he can do a lot. He's already done a lot for the position. And I just like talking nice about him so he never thinks I'm mad at him, because he's a scary, scary big man.
So I'm just trying to go back and look at it now. Yeah, all right. This is insane. Derrick Henry, as you mentioned, a little bit on the older side. Played for a Tennessee Titans team last year that had turned over a bunch of its offensive line, wasn't the best group, had a rookie quarterback starting, had a couple different quarterbacks make their way through there. All this stuff, yada, yada, yada. Derrick Henry was second in rushing yards in the NFL behind Christian McCaffrey. And I get volume stats don't tell the whole story. I don't know what he averaged in, yards per game or anything like that. I don't have that pulled up in front of me. But the fact that last year, given all the things we mentioned about that circumstance, given you had another back in that backfield that they were trying to get some touches to, and he still was over 1,100 yards last season and second in the NFL in rushing, ahead of Kyren Williams, although with, I think, like 50 more carries than Kyren Williams. All that to be said, he's walking into the best rushing offense in the NFL. Like, it is not a stretch to say Derrick Henry could lead the league in rushing next year. Christian McCaffrey had outpaced him by like 300 yards, but I don't know, man. You put Derrick Henry behind an offensive line that's certainly better than the one he had in Tennessee, with the ultimate quarterback run threat in the backfield, another guy in Keaton Mitchell to come spell him. I don't know, and I mean, he's fueled by the power of one of the coolest jerseys in the sport. Dad, this could absolutely be a guy that wins the rushing title north of 30.
Yeah, I think it would be absolutely amazing. I love watching the guy run. Like you said, in those black unis, he is, just going to look so. He's the first guy off the bus all the time. Always has been. Since high school, hell, he's been that guy. So, nothing new here.
The only other one I'd throw out there, Josh Jacobs is going to be fascinating. And I think because he's in Green Bay, because so much of the story has been Jordan Love, and because Saquon Barkley, way bigger name in way bigger name going to Philadelphia. Derrick Henry, way bigger name going to a better team right now, or one that was so good last year we expect them to be back in that spot. Green Bay, the expectations are going to be up, but I do think there's going to be a lot less pressure on Josh Jacobs, who is the youngest, the least injured of these running backs, the most productive in certain ways that project out well going forward, behind a line and in a system last year that I think gives him a really good chance to be productive, like we saw Aaron Jones and company. I think is also going to be someone very interesting to watch, because we know every year it feels like these guys are on trial for their lives. Pumped for this one. You guys have probably seen it all over Apple TV Plus right now. One of the most popular things out there, the Dynasty, New England Patriots. And we are fortunate enough to have Matt Hamacheck with us here, the director and executive producer. And Matt, I'm glad we got you here now as we're talking, and when this is going to come out, it's going to be towards the end of this, almost the whole project now finally released for you. And I guess starting there, you spend all this time and put so much work and effort into this, and now you're getting ready to finally have the whole body of it released to everybody here. What's that been like? What's the reception been like now that you've got almost all this out there?
The reception's been great. I mean, in a national audience, the people that don't live outside of a 50-mile radius of Boston who have been, consuming this story and picking sides and all sorts of other things that I'm just discovering now, this is fascinating. It's a great study of humans and how they interact with each other, how you create something that's great and how you sustain it, but then eventually how it falls apart. The best thing for me is, I got to, every week I get a phone call from some of the people that were in the thing, and I get to hear how they feel about it, and to hear them say like how much they're liking watching this thing. Some of the guys that are part of the second half of the Dynasty are watching the first half and saying, "Oh, I didn't know that. That's really interesting." And then some of the people, the coaching staff, like Ernie Adams, I just had dinner with him last night, and he's, and it's like just to hear him sort of say, it's like really fascinating to watch all this.
I think part of it is too also what subjects are willing to give you. Bill Belichick is famously stingy at the podium, like you mentioned, and there's a couple very icy moments where you're trying to get stuff out. Take us inside the room of trying to crack the facade of the most notorious mask in sports.
Trying to crack, it wasn't even that. It was more just, I'm going to ask Bill the same questions that I asked everybody else. And, the Aaron Hernandez episode that aired, last week, I talked to Ernie Adams, who was Bill's right-hand man, his best friend since high school, and I asked him how he felt about it. And Ernie gave, I think, a great answer, which was, we had no idea what was going to happen. We couldn't have known that this was going to happen, but maybe the best thing for him would be somewhere where he wasn't so close to the people he knew so well, right? And then when I asked Bill, he didn't really want to talk about it. And so I put both in. And that's sort of how I look at it, is I'm going to ask the questions, people are going to give me answers, and that's it. And I sort of treated Bill the same way I treated everybody else. Each of the episodes, they're an arcing sort of 10-part movie, right? Sure. But within each of those, there's always these themes and and a larger question that you're always trying to answer. And really, the way that I got to that initial question was, it was one of the first times I talked to Ernie Adams, of all people. He said, every team gets there at the beginning of every year, and they say, we're going to win the Super Bowl this year. But his response is, but not everybody is willing to do what it takes to get there. And when I heard that, I remember sort of a light bulb going, it's like, oh, that's really interesting. So maybe the question that we're going to be trying to answer over the course of these 10 episodes is, what does it take to get there and sustain it and to do this for 20 years?
Like you said, what goes into winning for that long? I think you mentioned a lot of those things right there. And it seemed like the Eagles Super Bowl that I know comes up in the later episodes here, that and the decision with Malcolm Butler, it seems like starts to go a long way and starting to undermine maybe some of that belief that, everything Bill Belichick's doing for us is in the name of winning. Did you get anywhere in that? Because I know that's the answer a lot of people are going to come into this one.
Yeah. So I think that, I don't want to spoil anything, sure. but I think that we get closer to understanding it. There's nothing definitive, but somebody says something in it that gets you a little bit closer to understanding what it is. The question is, some of these tensions that are starting to bubble up, what happens when the winning cures everything part of this doesn't happen? And I think that's what a lot of it is. And I think what Danny Amendola says at the end of that Super Bowl when he's walking off the field is, he said, I put my body, my head, everything on the line for this, and to not even be able to get an explanation, I felt cheated. And I don't mind saying that. I think that, and then you see Tom sitting on his couch talking about, these concepts of what you give, what you sacrifice, and things like that. So, I think that there was some tension that came out of that.
It certainly seems like it, and like you said, that from the player's standpoint of just not ever getting a reason why something like that happens.
But I want to tell you something that I learned over the course of making this thing, because I think this is important to understand in terms of the coach-player dynamic that exists throughout. I'm a Packers fan, so Vince Lombardi is it for me. That's the GOAT when it comes to coaches. I heard a story while I was making this that in the middle of one of the first championship runs, they were playing the Vikings and they were losing at halftime. They all come into the locker room, and apparently Vince Lombardi sort of grabs his arm or his chest or something and says, "Ah," like that, and people don't know what's happening. So apparently the trainers or somebody's saying, "Somebody get the trainers, somebody get the medical staff," blah, 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 blah. One of the players apparently says, "Let the MFer die." Now, what I'm trying to point out here is this. The greatest coaches in the history of this game, they weren't, holding hands with their players, skipping on a rainbow, singing Kumbaya as they marched their way to multiple Super Bowl wins. That may not be, what I'm trying to say is that motivating people to do something that they wouldn't do unless you were there to motivating, and doing it in a way that brings something out of it, and not necessarily always being pleasant, is part of what gets to that larger question of what does it take to get there? What does it take to sustain it? And what does it take to get there again and again and again?
One of the refrains that we always heard about the Patriots and their dynasty is, we'll never see something like this again.
Yeah.
How is it seeing this all come out with the backdrop of a team in the Kansas City Chiefs, who is now in the midst of a dynasty? We've officially put it on there, and does it in a way that's completely antithetical to what you talked about, or completely the opposite, where there seems to be a lot of joy on that team. The relationship between coach and quarterback seems drastically different than the one that was here.
Well, who knows, right? I mean, and time will tell. They're basically at the place where I think they've won 3 and 5 years. The Patriots by 2004/2005 had won 3 and 4 years, right? And then we will see. The thing that they have a chance to do this season that the Patriots could never accomplish is the three-peat, right? Yep. And so we'll see if that happens, but time will tell. It's interesting.
I guess the underlying question, that's your point, whether it is micro here in the Boston and New England area where people have their different camps, or the national media conversation of who deserved more credit between Brady and Belichick.
Scott Pioli says in episode 10, I ask him that question, and he says it's disrespectful to even ask that question because it ignores all the people that came through this thing and contributed. And that's the thing that everybody ignores when they ask the question, is it's not just either one of them. It's think about all the guys in the locker room, the captains in the locker room who, we talk about this in episode 5. It's the guys like Brewski, Rodney Harrison, Ty Law, later generations, Devin McCourty, Slater, all these different people that when the new guys came in and they didn't understand Belichick's sort of harder coaching style, they would sort of say, this is the way it is. If you want to get that ring, get on board. And one of the things it's not in is at the end of one of the training camp speeches, like the first one that Bill gave to the team at the end of one of these years, Damian Woody told the story about how Bill said, there will be no light at the end of the tunnel. There will be nothing. And Brewski looks over and he goes, buckle up, Buttercup. And I thought that was just great, because it's just, because that's the point. It's like, you're going to be along on this ride and you are privileged to join us and get in line because it's going to be like this, right? And I think that yes, it was Bill Belichick's greatness that created this culture, but it was the buy-in of everybody, right? And that kept going and going and going for so long. And I think what I would love more than anything else is to see where Bill coaches next and to see the guys that he brings in that are going to be those voices in the locker room that will help him carry his message through to a new team.
It's going to be fascinating, and I think until then, so basically it sounds like the answer to the Brady or Belichick question, the answer is evidence inconclusive after 10 episodes for you guys?
Completely inconclusive, and as Scott Pioli says, disrespectful to even ask. Now, I'm not trying to say, I asked the question, so trust me.
Exactly.
But it's a lot of people. It's a sort of a silly answer. I know it doesn't sound great, but it's like it takes a village thing. But it's true.
Especially from Scott's perspective, I didn't know if the players had offered up anything different.
They all feel that way. Yeah. I think it's everybody. These guys look, everybody, even the guys that say, like I was talking about with Danny saying, I felt like I got cheated and all this kind of stuff. They all know that Bill Belichick's the greatest coach of all time. That was just a specific instance where they feel like they didn't get something, and that's it. So
like you said, it's a fascinating look over 10 parts at the human psyche and what it takes to win at this level. The Dynasty, New England Patriots. Matt, I hope everyone checks it out on Apple TV Plus, obviously, but thank you for the time and insight here, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
Gojo and Golic, the Players' Championship is underway at TPC Sawgrass. Heading into this, the DK odds opened Scheffler as the favorite at plus 550. Rory McIlroy was second behind him, but his odds were 12-1. So that chopped in half. He's in a three-way tie right now, 3 under with Cantlay, but Cantlay still here at 12-1. So one may say the value's there, but it's hard to go against what McIlroy and Scheffler has been doing as of late. Now, of course, they're focusing on just getting the task at hand done. But McIlroy did talk about the PGA Tour's relationship with Saudi Arabia and the Public Investment Fund. Take a listen.
If I were a fan, I would want to watch the best players compete against each other week in, week out. And to me, that seems like the lowest hanging fruit. Well, not the lowest hanging fruit, but basically, okay, I think if you just unified the game and brought us all back together in some way, that would be great for the fans. I would imagine. And then I think that would then put a positive spin on everything that's happened here. And we're like, okay, get together. We all move forward. And I think people could get excited about that.
Gojo, thoughts on what he had to say about that, and then also maybe if you saw some value on the board there as we looked at the odds.
Boy, is that depressing. Like, Rory was the dude out in front beating his chest for the PGA, and exactly what people said would happen with these people with all of the money trying to sports wash their reputation happened. They beat them to sleep with money. They said, we will outlast you, and we will eventually wear you down to a point where that's Rory McIlroy very publicly dead in my mind, looking up and admitting we kind of need them right now as they look at their field this week with no John Rahm, no Brooks Koepka, no Dustin Johnson, no Cameron Smith, no Bryson DeChambeau. A lot of these guys that some of them had been accomplishing at a very high level. John Rahm, obviously the Masters champion. Brooks Koepka has played much better golf since going over to live, even on some of the majors that he's been involved in. But other big names, guys that had started to give you a lot of juice in the sport, and you combine that with the fact that Tiger Woods, because of injuries, not playing this week, and they're sitting in a tournament that's supposed to be golf's fifth major that lacks a lot of the same juice. The TV ratings have all been down for a lot of the PGA events, and now you've got a very clearly dejected Rory McIlroy. It sounds like waving the white flag in a way that's depressing to me.
Well, he definitely is. I mean, he ended up just banging his head off the wall, right? I mean, just basically spitting into the wind on what was going on. So now all the players that went to live, they're the ones that made out the most. They made a ton of money. One thing I think we can fairly easily say is the thought of a rival tour to the PGA is not happening. Live is not that. Nobody watches Live, but some people have a hard time finding Live. But what you've done is it's like if you took the NFL and made different leagues, right? And one was seen, barely seen, while the other was the one that was seen all the time, but you split the talent up. So now Rory is saying, okay, listen, I was mad at this at first. Now he realizes not a damn thing I can do about it. These guys grabbed the bag, cool, but now our game is worse off for it because all the best players aren't together. And I don't know if a lot of lay people care about this, quite honestly, but ratings are down. So obviously they care a little less about the golf because not all the top players are together. So it would be in their best interest to figure out what's going on with the strategic sports group that's supposed to fund the PGA and obviously PIF, what their involvement is going to be, and if eventually we're going to get all the players back together again. Because the first thing we thought was once this deal was done was Live would be no more and you would be back to one tour with all the players on tour. But obviously there's been no decision made. Live continues to go. You still have trouble finding it. Nobody's watching it, but there's some of the best players in the world are playing in it. So you don't get that competition that you want on the PGA. So I get it. Rory tried. Rory tried to stand up and shake his fist, and he did, and realize, this ain't doing me no good, so we got to find another direction.
The goal for LIV was never to be a competitive league opposite the PGA. The goal was to do this. It was to weaken the PGA's product enough to where they would come back and kiss the ring. Because remember, when it went with all the investments that the PGA had, we saw this big show of force with them out in the media. Like, oh, maybe we don't need PIF. Maybe we don't need the LIV guy. And that has aged like sour milk for them right now, because the goal was just to weaken it. Yeah, LIV knows you can't find the golfers. They don't care. Their golfers are fat, happy, and full of money, playing golf in shorts 3 times a weekend instead of 4, and enjoying all of those perks that come with less stress of the job. But it's made the sport objectively worse by like the ultimate axiom. And Bomani Jones has always said this: you win with quality. And right now, you've removed some of the quality players. Not all of them. There's still great players here. Like we're talking about Scotty Scheffler, who's going to go out and try and be the first person to defend his title at the Players. No one's ever done that before. He just won last weekend at the tournament he played at here. And there's all these great stats about how he's actually primed to do that in a way because of the way he's putting right now, because of how well he's played over the last couple of years. All good indicators that, yes, he could pull this off. But I think it's twofold, Dad. One, you've had golf that's been searching for names to hand the baton off to for a while. And you saw stuff like Full Swing. They're trying to get into the Netflixification of sports by trying to build out more of these characters. And then when a bunch of them leave and go to a place where you can't watch or find them, and you're not watching things like that Brooks Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau little beef that were fun and good storylines for casual fans that weren't diehard golf fans. And now you couple that with, and I don't think this can be overstated, the fact that you have now lost the Tiger Woods juice. Even at this stage in his career, Tiger being involved was always going to zhuzh everything up a little bit, and I think we're all starting to deal with the cold reality. That's just not going to be a thing as often as any of us want to, if at all anymore, based on what's happened with his body.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested where this ends, what deal is actually struck, and the timing of it and what it's going to mean for golf. I mean, I don't know. Right? Just like we don't know what's going on in college football with the players and where that's going to end up. I don't know where this one's going to end up. I don't know what the end game is, Mike. I don't. Of where they'd love it to go back to what it was, but I don't know where it's going to go or how it's going to get there. Now that you have the PGA Tour, as I said, the SSG and the PIF, you have 3 entities all trying to work toward one common goal. I think is obviously way easier said than done, since this has taken longer than I think a lot of people thought.
The next step is, according to the people involved talking about this, is for the PIF folks to meet with the players director on the PGA policy board, which is includes Tiger Woods and Jordan Spieth. And so they've got some decisions to make there about the future and what this ends up looking like for everybody around golf. In the meantime, I guess this is kind of what you get. Like, you got to hope that guys like Rory are in the mix when it comes to the end of a lot of these tournaments. Scotty Scheffler, we mentioned, would be the first player to defend his title at the Players. There hasn't been a player, and this is courtesy of Mark Schlabach over at ESPN, there hasn't been a player to win one week and then defend a title the next week since Tiger Woods in 2007, when he won the PGA Championship and then defended the WGC Bridgestone Invitational. So Scotty Scheffler in an interesting position right now. Again, last year went away, ran and hid with this thing, won by like 5 strokes last year at the Players. And so he's the 6th-ranked player in the world. It all makes sense and lines up to where we could see a guy make history. And Dad, now the question everyone's going to be wondering is, how much will anyone care about this in the general casual fan group of people watching golf that have been the ones they've been actively, like, clearly all the moves that we've mentioned, you don't do the Netflix stuff unless you're concerned with casual eyeballs. You don't pump all this money into the special events around the sport that you have unless you're concerned about your station in the sport compared to this other group that popped up. And so if all of those are the things that they're chasing right now, the metrics have come back pointing downward away from your goal.
But and the thing we haven't seen in golf, we've seen it fragmented with LIV, and the question we've always asked once Tiger was on the descent was, who's the next Tiger? We don't have the next Tiger. We have a fragmented game right now. All that being said, there is nothing like Rory McIlroy last week driving a 400-yard hole. That at Bay Hill, the one Scheffler won, watching a man drive a 400-yard hole was one of the coolest things I've seen in a while.
Well, I can do you one better than that, because coming up next, we will get to the coolest visual in all of sports from this past week. One man and his passion for lawn care. That's next here on Gojo and Golic. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of your day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out here live Monday through Friday on the DraftKings Network. And also live on VSiN, or sorry, not live on VSiN, the best of on VSiN, noon to 1 p.m. Eastern every day, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio. If you miss any of the show or our great guests live, thank you to the Dynasty, New England Patriots director and executive producer, Matt Hamacheck, for joining us to talk about that documentary. You can get to that wherever you get your podcasts, available right here, as well as soon as we finish up on YouTube. Guys, let's get to this. We've seen a lot of money go out in free agency, and I always say between the draft and free agency, I love watching young men change their lives forever, change their families' lives forever, and get access to generational type money that they can do any number of things with. And it's always fun seeing what matters most to guys who make sure their mom never has to work again, buy their parents a house. And then some people, like our guy Landon Dickerson, Philadelphia Eagles offensive guard who signed an $84 million contract on Tuesday, and when asked about what he was going to do with the money, had the most O-line answer humanly possible.
I mean, I have a financial advisor for a reason. I don't know, I may go get a new lawnmower, kind of something I've been looking into.
Riding?
Yeah, zero turn.
And you can see why this man is so passionate about lawn care. Yeah. First off, I had someone when I got to the NFL and Steelers camp say, offensive linemen are rich forever because they do stuff like this. Because you buy one car and ride it into the ground, or you buy a mower for your beautiful stretch of property in Philadelphia. For those who can't see, this image surfaced yesterday, an overhead shot of Landon Dickerson's house, or what's reportedly his house. Dad, with one of the most immaculately kept lawns I have ever seen. Now, you are someone that for a while masqueraded decorated as a person who wanted to mow their own lawn, had a mower and had a John Deere, and then forsake that in the name of turfing your backyard here. So how much envy do you have seeing him live out the dream of the life you thought you wanted?
Well, first off, turfing the backyard had to do with the fact that we've always had multiple dogs, and I hate where the grass kept dying where they peed and pooped on it. With the turf, it was very easy to clean up. Yeah, but having the riding lawnmower is one of the greatest joys of just going out and just doing your thing. Hell, I had you and Jake on them. You guys grew up. You guys learned how to do it as well. I enjoyed that. It's kind of that father-kid moment that you can pass on. But I loved riding lawnmowers. I love doing the lawn with a riding lawnmower. Look at all that space he's got. I mean, that is just a fun, cool thing to do.
And with the football
Well, I mean,
career,
he's clearly good at it. He's an artist.
I was going to say, after football,
Yes.
he knows what he's going to do. Just start a lawnmower company. Easy.
It's Forrest Gump. It's straight out of the plot of Forrest Gump. Landon Dickerson is going to live that right now. I think we need to figure out what tech company Landon Dickerson ends up investing in because it's sure to pop off there. But I love that for him. I like to think that somewhere Rick Ross, who very famously gets high, rides around his lawnmower and writes the lyrics to some of the best songs that we have listened to over the last number of years, is probably nodding in approval. And we know he likes offensive linemen. I think if I remember right, he was a big fan of Ryan Jensen from the Tampa Bay Bucks and invited him over to his house to come hang out. So Landon Dickerson, maybe he'll be the next one. Rick Ross seems to have a kinship with offensive linemen and with lawnmower enthusiasts. So this feels like the right way to go. Speaking of other hobbies, Claudia, let's get to that and some attack on my lifestyle that happened over the weekend.
Yeah, I know you're going to like this one, Gojo. There is a Twitter storm right now because a composer, Oscar-winning composer, got an award. And in the speech, he said, "To my parents, thank you for giving me guitars and drum machines instead of video games." And then people are quote tweeting it, saying video games aren't an art form. Of course, the gamers are coming out saying video games are an art form. I cannot speak on this, Senior. I don't know about you, but Gojo, I do know you can. So what do you have to say about the fact of whether video games are or not an art form?
Yeah, Ludwig Göransson. I forget which movie he won. I'm assuming it was probably Oppenheimer. I just assume if he won an Oscar this year, it was probably for Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
So yeah, all right. So there we go.
That was.
Came out there. Video games caught astray in that. Dad, what I will say is this is like an old trope that I do feel like most people thought we were past. It's not surprising that someone works in music would kind of stick their nose up to what's going on over in the video game world, as if you can play God of War Ragnarok and not shed tears at the beauty of that storyline here, that's a you problem and you don't have a pulse. I mean, if you can't appreciate that art, some of the dialogue, the voice actors that they employed there, and the care that they took in telling that story of a father and son trying to grieve, that I don't know, that's a you problem, that's not a me problem.
So I just want to get this out so we understand. I know you love video games. I get it. But you also have to be a realist and understand, and I hope you will agree, video games is not an art form. It's not. It's not.
Absolutely
video
is.
Game.
Absolutely is.
In what way is a video game an art form?
The people creating these incredibly elaborate stories and universes, it's basically like if you could tell a book more thoroughly in the way that you would do a movie. Like imagine for Lord of the Rings, you have this incredible trilogy of books written by J.R.R. Tolkien, and you could never possibly fit all that information onto the screen, even in a movie that really a universe that spans 2 trilogies, in that and the Hobbit trilogy. But you got a chance to tell that over an entire video game space that people can actively live through. Yes, it's an art between the visuals, between the storytelling. I can't believe we're having that. It's the biggest change, I would say, Claudia, between when I left video games in my 20s and when I got back as a 30-something-year-old, is the fact that now these games are telling movie-quality stories while also inviting you to have a hand in the process.
I was going to say, it is like a movie, Senior. Like, I get what you're saying. I don't play video games for a reason, but they are impressive. And technically, an art form is defined any activity or medium similarly regarded as a means for the expression of creative impulses or professional expertise, which I do believe video games falls under. So I have to side.
Dad, you know
The
what?
Last of Us.
You know what? I'll stand corrected then. The people who create the video games, yes, okay, I will. That does fit the definition. But the people who sit in front of
I
their
was just gonna
TVs
say-
and play them for hours on end, that's a different story.
Those people also make a lot of money. So for them, it's an art form that's become an
few
incredibly
do.
lucrative financial path, too.
Some do, not the majority.
I'd say more than you probably are aware of, but I would also say it has given way to, think about it, The Last of Us was such a compelling story as a game that HBO turned it into one of the most beloved series of the last calendar year, and Nick Offerman ended up winning an award because of it, and many awards because of it. So I feel like the case is closed on this one. Me arguing in favor of the other people that stare at the TV all day and do the thing that makes Dad upset. Claudia, let's get to the third here, as one man had a bit of an accident during his job.
We stand video games. Jason Derulo really had to go. Really had to go during his concert. You would think he'd go to the bathroom beforehand, but no, because he had to stop his concert in the middle of it. And he said, hey guys, sorry, I gotta go use the bathroom. People thought he was joking, as you would. And he wasn't. So the UK crowd was booing, and they can be pretty harsh. And so we have a video. It's not actually from the moment, but I guess they went and made a TikTok video as a parody. As you can see here, if you're not watching, it's him dancing and then showing that he has to go to the bathroom, as you do as a 3-year-old child, and then running off stage. But apparently this did happen. I mean, I don't know the last time I listened to Jason Derulo, but he's been around for a while. Don't you know? We do a 2-hour show. We go to the bathroom before. It's common sense, no?
So this was interesting. I went and asked for all music subject stories. I go to our buddy Jason Fitz, who in addition to working and doing a great job over at Yahoo Sports, our former teammate at ESPN, spent 7 years as the fiddle player in the band. Perry was a classically trained violinist, and so has been around in a lot of these situations. And I asked him, does this happen very often? Is this a real thing? And the response was almost never. So you're right, Claudia. This is not something that should happen. There are plenty of other ways this usually gets handled, because I would imagine he's not the first person to have to maybe go pee or poop during a concert and find a way to do it with a little bit more grace.
That's the big question. If you have to do it, is it number 1 or is it number 2? Okay? Because there's a difference. Number 1, you can run off side stage and go in a bottle. Number 2 is going to be a little more involved. And the more you sprint, if you have to do that, the more you may, lose that battle trying to get there in time. Yeah.
I think we can analyze the run, and I could probably give you, based on his stride length, a pretty accurate representation of what was about to go down. If you appreciate what went down here, download, subscribe, rate, and review it. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
You guys are nasty.